All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Ethical Hypothetical, the show where a comedian and a psychologist and now another comedian discuss hypothetical ethical conundrums. Alex and Hara, let's hear from you guys first. How you guys doing?
Yeah, going well.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Very excited.
Beautiful. Very short and sharp. Hara's got a bodybuilding comp coming up.
Yes. Cheers to that, to my 10 liters of water a day.
She's in a major caloric deficit right now.
I look very sleep and very depleted. I'm very sorry.
Don't apologize.
Just think about all those calories you're going to consume next week.
Woo!
Yeah, are you gonna have like one fuck cheat day after?
Oh, 2, and then I'll reverse diet. Yeah. Okay, I have it all planned.
Do you know where you're gonna go or like where you're gonna eat?
Yeah, I've already pre-booked places, ordered catered food at my house.
Awesome.
I'm going extra.
That's
going to be so rewarding.
Yeah, very excited.
Well, good luck. Good luck for next weekend. We've got two wonderful guests for this episode. We've got Emma and Lockie. Tell us a bit about yourself. Let's hear from Emma first.
I'm a student studying at the moment. I also work part-time. I'm a female in the 20s kind of age range. Politically, I don't know what I am politically. That's it.
Beautiful. And Lockie, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm 21. I'm a student as well. Also doing a bit of social media stuff that started all in lockdown. So doing all the TikTok stuff and YouTube and all the Instagram stuff. So also working at Liquorland part-time, so living the dream as well.
Nice. What's your favourite beverage?
Ooh. You can't really go past the Carlton Dries, but they just brought out these sour grape cruisers, which are pretty lethal. Because it just tastes like Hubba Bubba if it was a drink.
Sour grape
on
cruiser.
those at the moment.
All right. A lot of 14-year-olds who don't know their limits are going to have fun with that one. Okay. Well, Hara is going to take the lead with this one. So, Hara, take it away.
Okay. So, your job is to select one person who can enter your country. So I'll be reading the scenario of 6 different people or the background, and then I'll ask you to raise your hand for the person that you think that should enter your country. So please.
So out of the 6 people, we choose one. Is that?
Yes.
So we'll put our fingers up then. Is that how we'll do it?
Yeah. Raise your hand or your finger at the end when I ask you. But first, I'll present the 6 candidates. Okay. So the first person is an uneducated person that has 4 children. Second person is also uneducated, has 4 children, and is a refugee from a climate change disaster. The third person has 4 children and is a political refugee who has been accused for espionage against their government of their country. Fourth person has 4 children and is part of an independence freedom fighting militia. That militia is deemed as a terrorist group by the US. The 5th person was born in your country, left your country to join an extremist group overseas. They had their citizenship stripped away, and now 10 years later, they're claiming that they have learned from their mistakes and they're seeking refuge back to their own country of birth. And then the last person is a person who's coming from a has very close economic ties to your country, and your country is dependent on them. However, that country violates human rights of minorities. So I know it's a little bit complicated, but you have now these 6 people who would let in, I guess, or would prefer person number 1, who is the uneducated person with the 4 children. Okay, number 2, uneducated, 4 children, climate change refuge. Number 3, The person has 4 children, political refugee, but is accused of espionage in their country. And then number 5, the person, they've left the country and they've joined the overseas extremist group coming back. They're asking for forgiveness. And then number 6, the country they're coming from has very close economic ties with your country. And alrighty, beautiful. You guys
I've changed. I didn't answer any of them because
I know, I'm aware of that.
I was still thinking about it, but I'm gonna go with number 2.
Okay, cool.
Wait, so you have to pick one out of the 6, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
You've done the right thing. Okay,
I'm going with number 2.
Very interesting. Yeah. Okay. So everyone except Alex picked number 2.
I nearly picked number 2.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And then Alex, he wanted to go with the third person, the person who's been the political refugee rather than the climate change. So it's between climate change refugees and political refugees. Very interesting.
It's a tough one because there's so many variables there. I almost went with number 6 because, if the country is violating human rights, then I have no reason to assume that person seeking refuge is actually violating the human rights themselves. And could they actually be a victim of those human rights abuses? With number 3, I just need to know more about why they're a political refugee. For example, if they're escaping a totalitarian regime and they're pro-democracy, then 100% I'd let them in. But, if they're a political refugee because they're, an armed militia communist group, and then...
True. I didn't consider that. Whoops! Dude, thank God I'm not in charge of anything.
Can we make Alex the immigration minister? Just like, how many people have you killed? All right, get in.
You seem sick. Come on in.
So I went with 2 because it was
just
the one where it was the most neutral, and that's not through any fault of their own. And why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I went with number 3 because in my head, so I didn't. This is the annoying thing. I didn't consider that maybe they were a political refugee because they weren't doing the right thing, like morally. You know what I mean? Because I guess my parents would probably be considered political refugees.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that feels close to home. And also because it was always between number 2 and 3. Because number 2, it was, well, they didn't do anything. It's just they're escaping, so they didn't do anything wrong. Come on in. But for political refugee, it felt like you took such a risk to come over here, and you didn't know if that was necessarily going to pay off. Assuming that you were escaping, some sort of like fucked fascist government or something like that. Then I'm like, you should come here. I would let you in.
Yeah. What about you, Emma? What's your reasoning?
Mine was based on a lot of assumptions. I think that's what we kind of go on of here. Mine was off the assumption that it was a serious climate catastrophe to the point where, they couldn't survive in their country any longer healthily. So I just decided, if that person, for example, doesn't have any shelter, safe food, anything at all, that just kind of rings off as priority. But the political refugee also did ring a bell because of my past. My parents as well were political refugees, and that was because of their religion. So their religion was different from the main countries, and they were pretty much attacked and prosecuted because of that. So
which country?
Iran.
Okay. So what were they? Baha'i or something?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's so many. People here in Adelaide, at least, that I know that are Baha'i from. Very interesting.
So from that perspective, I wanted to choose that, but thinking, who's more likely to die ASAP, it's probably the second one, simply because if it's quite bad, this is all based off an assumption. If it's quite bad, then they don't have food, water, anything. So, yeah.
What about you, Lucky?
Yeah, I think I was coming from a similar standpoint in the fact that if it's a climate catastrophe, it kind of takes the responsibility out of people's hands. And I mean, you can look at it from the perspective, you make the assumption that it's climate change caused by human effects on the environment. But even still, it's something that it's more out of somebody's control. And also the fact that you got to take in that she has the 4 kids as well. And also the fact that this person, he or she, is uneducated. They might not have the skills to be able to go into a job after this catastrophe has happened in order to support themselves and their 4 kids. So I think, first of all, they've had the responsibility of this catastrophe taken totally out of their hands. It might be something that's happened super quickly and they can't have any control over it. And the fact that they might not be able to rebound at all if they are uneducated to the level where they can't get a job that'll be able to support that person and the 4 children that they have.
Nice. Very interesting. Yeah. Very logical reasoning. I didn't expect that everyone would be, I guess it sounds like responsibility plays a very big role in people's reasoning. And I guess whether, you...
who would you have chosen?
Yeah. I didn't even think about it. I don't know why I didn't even think about the climate change disaster. I was thinking more of the political refugees. Yeah, I think I was gonna go more with the political refugee. I think because my parents are not political refugees, but yeah, I think it's between, again, number 2 and 3 for myself as well, just because of that. You get put into a position rather than you choosing to be, let's say, a freedom fighter for your country.
Yeah, what's more valuable? Like, it's hard to tell. It's also like one of those things where it's like, whatever, guys, you two just at the border, scissors, paper, rock, this one out. Don't leave it in my hand.
Wrestle.
The other
this
one,
is hard.
Go home. Why don't we talk broader just about immigration intake and refugees? What do you guys think governments should be looking out for in an advanced economy like Australia when it comes to refugee intake? Now, not talking about just migrant intake here, but refugee intake. What sort of things should they be prioritizing, and at what point do they say, well, we've just reached our limit, we don't have the infrastructure to hold anymore? Do you think those things should come into it, or do you think advanced nations have a moral responsibility to just take anyone who is seeking refuge? Let's hear your thoughts on that. I know that's a pretty broad question there, but how about Emma? Because you have come from a background that where your parents were refugees. What do you think about that?
I think it really comes down to which one is the most life-threatening. And in my opinion, all that matters with the people is that they want to be in a safer environment. I think everyone knows that everyone has the right to safety. That's a basic human right. And in terms of how many people are let into the country, it becomes redundant to a point. If we honestly don't have the resources to take in, millions, I know if any country had the resources, they would have. Maybe not. It's a bit controversial. If they could, a lot of countries would. But then again, I would take as many as I could handle if I were a country and manage it. Because if you, for example, take a huge number of refugees and you don't even have the resources to look after them appropriate, it's a bit redundant. Kind of like detention centers. That kind of rings a bell, like something like that.
Lockie, what do you think?
Yeah, I think countries definitely have like a moral responsibility to take in as many refugees, migrants, immigrants that they are able to support. I think also based on the fact that, like what Emma was saying, if you're bringing in a bunch of people and then you've exhausted all your options and then you're sending them to detention centres, they might be living a life that, obviously they're away from a country of where maybe they're up against persecution. But at the same time, if they're living in a detention centre with awful conditions, they're not going to be living a life that's they're going to be enjoying, because their health's going to be at risk. And I mean, you look now, if you don't have your health, it's hard to have anything, especially in this day and age. So I think even countries having international partnerships in terms of, you saw throughout Europe when they had massive movement of people, there was a lot of countries who were saying, we can't take this many people, but there's a neighbouring country who can potentially take a few more people. So I think overall, we do have a moral responsibility, but it's also the fact that you need to be able to support a certain amount of people. And if you can't maybe send them to detention centres isn't always the best option, because as we've seen, there's been a lot of controversy with those. So having those international partnerships maybe gives an option to maybe send refugees who have come to your country to another one where they can be safe and they can live with their health as well, rather than being sent back or living in conditions that are maybe not even as good as where they came from.
But I have a question. If you were one of the people in the admission team selecting, I guess, which refugee would be coming in, what would be let's say, the top 3 criteria that you think our country or your country should make sure that, the refugees have?
Yeah. I think like the first thing that comes to mind is a little bit cynical in terms you want them to be somebody who's skilled or proficient in a way, in order, because you want them to be able to contribute to society, stimulate the economy. But that's kind of looking at a more base level. Everyone else wants to live a good life, so you stimulate the economy with skilled people. But at the same time, you got to look at the situation that people are coming from as well. I think if people are at risk of persecution, or like you said, a lot of political refugees, I think looking at people's circumstances should be definitely taken into account, whether we let them in or not, but also the fact that can they also contribute to society? And I think a lot of cases they may not be able to, but if you look at where they've come from and the hardships they've faced, they still should be given a chance to come somewhere where they are safe and where they can potentially develop skills. The third one, I don't know, decent sense of humour. That's always all right. It's not really an answer.
No German refugees then. It's such a tough issue. I really don't envy the politicians who have to make these decisions, because you can virtue signal and posture all you like, but there is a cost to bringing in exorbitant amounts of immigrants or refugees. And I'll even admit this as a person of color. There can be a destabilizing factor to society, and then also political ramifications, a lot more people turning to right-wing populism. Now, whether that's their fault or they're being discriminatory, that is also a conversation that needs to be explored. But I just think if you do bring too many, if there's an overflow, or if a city is transformed in terms of its population and its culture too quickly, I think there is a huge social cost to that. And I know that's a pretty conservative argument, but it is hard, because I think if I were a politician, I have to look out for my constituents, and ultimately I'd be doing what's best for the people who are already in the country. And if that means, unfortunately, turning some people away, I think that might have to be done. But I guess as an individual, if there was room, I hope that there was some sort of other way to facilitate a higher intake of migrants and refugees escaping really horrible conditions. If more people can donate to charities and maybe even offer up places in their houses. I don't know. I'm just sort of speculating ways where it doesn't necessarily involve the government. But yeah, it's such a tough issue. It's not easy.
Yeah.
And culturally, I think it plays a very big role where the population coming in is from. Because let's say, I think in France they have a massive issue with the minority Muslim population that has come in, and the integration or the lack of integration with the rest of the population. And I think that's in most of the European cities as well. So you don't want to, I guess, isolate them. You want to integrate them, but at the same time, some of them may not want to change their cultural beliefs. So yeah, it's very tricky.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I'll tell you what, this is kind of like an idealistic point of view, but and it's also, this is why this chat is so hard, because it is such like a head versus heart sort of thing. Yep. Like, because you want to be like, let everybody in. You want to do that. It's like, but also, I'm also aware that as a 24-year-old fucking dude, just a guy, I know that I haven't thought of every possible option that could go wrong. It's like, and most of us don't. It's too easy to get on Twitter and be like, let them all in. It's like, are you going to take them in your house? Where the fuck is it?
Exactly.
Like, but I will say that I still do believe that, at least with Australia, I think we've done something that a lot of countries, that honestly all the developed countries seem to have done, which is you integrate these like different cultures and it becomes part of the greater culture. Like, Australia was built on immigrants. That's definitely it. If you look around, you just walk, it's like, this is an immigrant country. It totally is. I feel like that is kind of important when you're thinking about, like, well, we don't want to bring too many people in from different cultures. Like, what are you talking about? We're 80% Greek already. Like, like, and I know that's being a little bit silly about it, but you know what I mean. Yeah. You know what I'm trying to say?
There's also a caricature of, you know, you can find the worst example of a refugee that did commit a crime and say, well, look, we can't risk it. But it seems strange that the right wing simultaneously wants more conservative values, but also wants less immigration. That doesn't make sense to me, because if you want more conservative values, bring in more immigrants. All right, like there's no one more conservative
they'll be
than
there.
Immigrants.
Straight up, dude. My dad's favorite prime minister was John Howard. It's like,
yeah,
what are you guys doing? Like,
yeah,
it's like, you want immigrants if you want to stay conservative. That's definitely it. It's also the same reason why, like, most of I think, what was it? It was like Florida was such a swing state for Donald Trump, right? Because it was heavily Cuban.
Yeah,
in fact, you're seeing that right now in America with that. There's a huge. Well, you can never tell.
The crisis with the
exactly, but you don't know if it's the media or whatever. But it's tough there, because they are taking quite a tough stance by all accounts. But if you don't take that tough stance, millions and millions will come in, and then that will just overrun all the social services, and you know, the shock to the economy and to just the community is going to be too great. And a lot of actually Latinos in America are swinging to Trump. Well, not Trump anymore, but to the Republican Party.
But it's interesting, because in Greece, during was it last year when there was a big influx of Syrian refugees? I think it was last year. A lot of them wanted to go to Germany and the UK, but they were stuck in Greece, because Greece had some islands that they had some camps. And so Europe said, just wait in Greece until later on, we'll take you in. And they waited for months, and it didn't happen. So people started burning down camps. There was, especially in one specific island. Oof. And in Italy, they've had the same issues with some refugees just wanting, I guess, to protest against being in the places that they don't want to be in. But, you know, the people that live in those islands, they are complaining. So at the beginning, they were so welcoming. But now they're like, we don't want them, because they are literally a danger to our society. Tourism, you know, from those islands is vanished. So, you know, like, what do you... And now there'll probably be a new influx of, you know, maybe people from Afghanistan. So people have different stance compared to the Syrians, for example.
Yeah, and I think something important to point out as well is they had very good intentions. They wanted to help the people, but it backfired. And it's really hard to find that line, and it's also very difficult to assert that line. Some people can be seeing it as, you know, oh, you're not letting them in, you're being very, you know, conservative and whatnot. But when in reality, you're just trying to do the most logical and best thing for your people, as well as the immigrants. Because as you said, if you burn down things and damage the island, that's also making their situation worse. It's making Greece and also the immigrants' situation worse. It's not helping anyone.
Definitely. Yeah, and it, by all accounts, over the next 10 to 20 to 50 years, basically, there's going to be a huge amount of climate refugees. In fact, Australia, the projections are not good. I think we've lost Hara. Have you guys lost Hara as well?
Hara? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
she got bored of the conversation.
She's
left.
gone. Gotta go eat. I think we'll just continue because we're nearing the end of the episode anyway. Unfortunately, it is Hara's episode. But what do you guys think, Emma and Lockie, about climate change refugees specifically? Because let's say in the 2050s and the 2060s, hell, even Australia might be just a complete barren wasteland. We've got no food production. Global supply chains are completely destroyed due to the climate catastrophe. Suddenly there's 30, 40 million Australians that are trying to seek refuge in, well, what, probably New Zealand. What can we, I think that should be a priority. We got to start thinking about sort of solidifying the food production chains and just thinking about contingency plans. That has to be a major priority. But our political system, because it's you're in for 3 to 6 years, there's no long-term thinking. That's a huge flaw, and we may pay the price. But what do you guys think about the potential for massive climate change refugees in the next century?
If that's okay, Lockie, I'll go first if you want.
Yeah, go
so I agree with you. It is a massive issue. As to how we can actually go about and manage this contingency plans, I think we need to direct a lot of resources and governments to actually focus on that, because there's still that kind of there's not 100% congruency, if that's the word, about the situation. Some people are still very skeptical about the climate and like climate change being real, and others are very like, yeah, this is a real thing. And there's also denial a lot from the government and also the community as well. So I think we just need to unite and come up with a plan. I think before we can really think of anything that we need to do, we need to think of all the possibilities and see if we can even manage it. Yeah, whatnot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, look, regardless of whether it's 100% going to happen, you want to prepare for the worst. That seems like a conservative thing to do.
Yes.
Even if there's a 20% likelihood that temperatures will balloon, plus 5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century, you need to prepare for that in case it does happen. Hopefully it doesn't. Now, you don't want to stifle the economy entirely, but for me, it's prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the most simple argument I've heard about it was like, it's like if there were a bunch of vampires coming and we all stocked up on onions, it's like it's like we just spent a bunch of money on onions, right? I know this. Hear me out. We just spent a bunch of money on onions. It's like if they didn't come, all we've got is some more onions.
You're not wrong.
You know what I mean? If they do come, we're fucked.
If we don't have the onions, yeah.
If we don't have the onions. I think ever since, for real, no lie, ever since I heard that argument, changed my life completely. I was like, that finally someone put it into terms I can understand.
It's a good point, right? Yeah, whatever the cost of preparing for the worst, even if that worst is a small possibility, the benefit we get from preventing the ramifications of that small possibility far outweigh the cost.
Yes.
Far outweigh.
Yeah, we'll just cook with more onions. That's it. It's like, if it doesn't happen, it's like, sweet, we get to do more sick dishes or whatever.
Onion
it's
will
probably
be the
better.
most Australian
Like,
dish
it's healthy.
there is.
Yeah, dude. It already is. It's on every Bunnings snack. Anyway, that's beside the point. My point is that it can't hurt any more than actual climate disaster. There's just no reality.
100%.
Yeah. I think something that Neil brought up, because Emma spoke about the fact that there's still a lot of division amongst people who buy into the fact that climate change is even real, which is really concerning. But I think the fact, that's obviously a massive factor. But I think the biggest thing is what Neil said, is the fact that a lot of politicians who have the power to implement this kind of change and programs where we can start, being more conservative with the way we intake food in our food processes. But they're going to be, most of them are in for about 3-6 years, like you said, and there's a big chance that most of the time they're in there, they're trying to hold on to their job, make sure they please their donors, and then hopefully get a nice cushy job in corporate somewhere after they're out of politics. And there's not a lot of people who are looking long term, which is really unfortunate. The people who are doing that are a lot of smaller groups who either don't have the funding, don't have the voice to be heard. And like you said, there's no harm, if we go back to the vampires, there's no harm in having that plan. I mean, Bill Shorten had a plan to implement a fleet of water bombers in the case of Australian bushfires, where statistically we can predict when they're going to happen. And with the change in climate, they probably will happen again. They'll probably be more ferocious as well. And the fact that a lot of people were saying, well, that's going to be too expensive to have this fleet of water bombers. Well, it's probably good if we have them anyway, because you saw how devastating the bushfires were now. And I mean, I know I'm going off topic, but it's the same thing. If there's already been this many changes with climate change, you can't imagine how damaging it's going to be in the future. So, taking these measures, I just think people's mindset isn't always positive towards it, because if they're paying for something or doing something for a cause and they can't see the immediate change or the immediate, payback of it, they don't see, like, they want that instant gratification of like, all right, here's this bit of money I've given you. All right, I want to see the change now. But it's like, no, this is stuff that'll happen way down in the future. And if we do things right, we won't even see it. It'll be the fact that we prevented it.
That's the problem as well, because even if it is a big cost over the next 10 years, we won't get any footage of how good it's been. It'll just be preventing disasters, right? And that's hard. That's a hard sell. It's hard in 40 years to say, hey, look, you would have burned to the ground if it wasn't for what the governments did 40 years ago. But that's exactly right. It's the incentive structure is all wrong. And, you could try and frame it in a more economically desirable way. There will be a huge global demand for climate change mitigating technology. So if Australia can, develop some patents and the technology of the future, those water bombers, for example, if we've got the latest technology in 10 years that we can then sell off to other countries who are also struggling with wildfires, boom, that's money. So there's an economic argument to be made for it, because you can foresee a huge demand for that kind of technology in the future anyway.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Now, I could just add, I think even when people talk about the economic factor, they make the argument that renewables will be more expensive with less jobs for people, but it just isn't the case. Like, you look at countries like India where they're moving to all renewables. That's a country with way more people per capita, a greater population, and it's developing more jobs for people. It's cost way less to produce than, something like coal power over in Australia. I think a lot of people just don't like change. It comes down to that like simple human nature that they don't like change. And if you're saying, well, we're going to try to move to a more sustainable future, people freak out. They're like, oh, how are you going to do that? Well, you do one thing at a time, and you slowly implement it. And there's other countries who are doing it, but people don't want to look outside their own bubble.
I think the other issue is that it takes a massive amount of capital to establish these things at first, which, we have to really think about. Do we really have the budget for that, number one? And number two, there's still other issues. Because the thing is, we can put preventative structures in place, and we can also put, so for example, looking at the environment and the climate change, we could spend the money on, managing the forests better and putting up measures to control the fires if they exist. We can also put money into controlling our emissions. So again, solar power, but those are different things, and they each take a stupid amount of money. So
yeah,
that's also another issue. It's looking at where the money actually flows in and how that actually benefits our society and country as a whole. It's really hard to kind of calculate that very well.
It is expensive. Yes.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question? And I don't expect anyone to really have an answer to this, because I don't either. But it's kind of going off of what Lockie said. Is there anything that would is there any sort of incentive that would excite you to rally for climate? Because you know what I mean? It's kind of what Lockie was saying about how it's not exciting because we can't really see the change. It's just preventative. Is there anything that you can think of that would be an actually good incentive to get people to rally for this?
I think a big part of it is it's associated with sort of hippie environmentalism. And a lot of people want to distance themselves from the tree huggers who go on bush doofs and have orgies. That's what a lot of people just associate with that, which Yeah, they're actively damaging the cause. It's like to me, it's quite a sort of rigorous scientific phenomenon based on the books I've read.
Every good thing has an awful audience
exactly.
group. Every really good, it's like Rick and Morty. Climate change is like Rick and Morty, where the fans ruin it.
Oh man, that's a perfect analogy, right? I think if you to maybe I'm just throwing out ideas here to you have to reframe the narrative around it. So if you say things like, look, do you want Australia to be number one? Well, the future industries are going to be this, and we want to be number one. So let's not lag behind. Let's not, be the losers of the 21st century. Let's fucking go for gold, you cunts. Okay? So that's
good. I'm excited.
That should be a government ad. Go for gold, cunts.
Go for gold, you cunts.
Authorised by Australian government Canberra.
Yeah. So I think reframing it, and also just understanding that it's not this kind of. There's a lot of just framing it in terms of left and right. Like, there's a huge portion of the left that is just feelings over facts. Okay, but this isn't, to me, at least from what I've read, this is not. And it's predictions. It's not facts. It is predictions. And those predictions sometimes don't come true. But like I said previously, I think you just got to prepare for the worst. In fact, that's, to me, is quite a conservative thing to do. Be prudent in, having the necessary means to ameliorate the worst effects of extreme weather conditions.
Yeah. It's hard to do,
but it is a cost. Like Emma said, there's a huge cost associated, and that who bears the brunt of that cost? Is it the taxpayer? Is it businesses? And then are businesses then hindered by that? To me, that cost is worth it. But there's a discussion to be had there. And I think when some people shut down the discussion by saying like, oh, you just think about the economy over everything, that's also not helpful. I think we do need to listen to, people who are more economically conservative on that issue and weigh up those costs. I personally think that cost is worth it. In fact, I'm personally happy to pay more taxes if it means not burning alive when I'm 60, but that could be, quite hyperbolic. I don't know. All right, so to wrap this episode up, apologies for the technical difficulties for anyone watching this if there's a lot of jump cuts, but what are your concluding remarks? Where's the line between being compassionate to people who need refuge versus looking out for the standard of living and the social cohesion of a home country? And then also, when it does come to the potential for climate change refugees, does that change your thinking over refugees? Emma, let's end with you first.
So I would just conclude by saying it's a multifaceted issue, and it's quite complicated. I think we need to consider all the different variables and the possibilities and focus on what can actually be done and not try to overburden our resources, but just still do as much as we can and liaison with other countries and work with them to see if we can kind of share the burden and share, the cost of all this.
Yeah, I tend to agree on most of what you said. I mean, there's going to be so many variables from person to person. So, looking at the situation that they're coming from in terms of the circumstances surrounding their country, whether they be fleeing persecution or some climate change catastrophe. So having a look at where they're coming from and if they're being displaced and they need to be welcomed in, but also looking at if they're going to be able to contribute to society positively as well is really important. But, and there's going to be some cases where it might be a really elderly person who can't work anymore, but you'll still take them in just because the places they're coming from, there's no way you could send them back there. So it's a really difficult one. There's no simple black and white answer. I think you got to look at all the variables, but hopefully you can do it with compassion and be able to take in as many people as you can while still letting the community that you're already in thrive and not be put under a burden either.
Sure.
Yes.
Alex, what do you reckon?
Yeah.
Start stocking up on onions.
Let's get these onions up. I think for me, it is definitely. I'm aware that it's definitely my heart over my head in this one, because I mean, obviously it's complicated, and we all know that, and everyone knows that. But I do think that if someone's come here seeking refuge because of like a climate disaster, or they are political refugees, they're being persecuted, I think it is sort of our responsibility to try almost go out of our way to see if we can bring them in. Just to at least match the effort that they've gone through, like to try bring them in as well. I think I do believe in that. I know it's more complicated, but ideally, and it is idealistic, ideally I would like to believe that we would go out of our way to try and make someone that went through all of that be able to actually live a life in our country. That would be nice.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Let us know your socials. What's Emma? Where can people find you if you'd like them to?
I mean, honestly, I'm one of those people who don't use social media much, just because I'm really busy all the time, and I don't know, the energy that it takes to deal with different opinions. So yeah, sorry, I don't have any social handles.
I found with you there. Lockie, what about you? What's your TikTok?
I am one of those people on social media because I crave attention. My TikTok is lock_mac, LACH_MAC. So not too many letters to remember. So go check it out. It's not as smart as this content, but it's okay.
And you can just find me at Alex Milikovic on Instagram and also on TikTok. Come fucking message me and tell me how much the onion thing was the dumbest thing you ever heard in your life.
Yeah, send your abuse through him.
He's going to get onion emojis in all your comment sections now.
All right. Cheers, guys. Subscribe, share the video. See you next time.